Okay, Natasha Donn, good to be talking to you for episode 4 of Natasha Donn's News Review. We are the resident podcast, and it's great to be with you. We love to hear from you. If you've got any feedback about the podcast or particular stories, news stories, articles that you would like us to take a look at, anything you've enjoyed particularly or have been intrigued by in the resident, do let us know. Natasha, what's caught your eye? What's our first article that we're looking at this morning?
Well, obviously, the first thing we've got to talk about is this amazing prestige that we have this week, because Portugal has been voted or hailed or nominated by The Economist magazine as the economy of the year, which is very good. But do you remember last week we talked about talked last week about the undercurrent in this country of poverty that just doesn't seem to be shifting. Yeah. And so what happened? It is marvelous that we got this prestige, and it's very, very good for Portugal from the point of view of international exposure,
reputation, global standing,
But what happened, and I think really he probably is kicking himself in the shins and saying what a silly boy I was. Well, what happened was that the Prime Minister, immediately he got this news, he rushed to social media and sort of did a rather self-gratifying message. I mean, he did thank the Portuguese people, but he also said, it just shows what the government's been doing in the last few months, which of course it had nothing to do, or very little to do, with what the government's been doing in the last few months. It's to do with a compound improvement of the economy, which has also come from the last government. We've got to appreciate that.
Yeah.
So he kind of did this rather self-satisfied message. And I think somebody in the government must have gone, oh, hang on, that probably wasn't the cleverest thing to say. And then later in the day, a man who really did say it exactly the way it should have been said from the start, which is the Minister of the Economy. He said, look, hang on. Let's not go overboard about this. This was great. And yes, we did make leaps and bounds in comparison to other countries who are not making leaps and bounds. Let's face it, Europe's not in a great place at the moment. But he said, we're still a very poor country. And I think that was really important that he said that, because he was trying to take away, he wasn't trying to say this is all because of us, the great government. This is a comparative thing. And we've got to remember he said, we are still a poor country. We're a very poor country, and now we're a less poor country. But
I think doing better than some other countries, because that was it, wasn't it? I mean, Spain won this, I believe, last year, and it was a bit of a least worst effort, wasn't it, with such poor performance across Europe. And this is his quote, isn't it? Manuel Castro made a ministry of the economy with his measured response that you're referring to, and territorial cohesion, which is a very interesting portfolio. He told TSF Radio, there is no point in celebrating, because although it is true we have been ranked as the best performing economy, coming in first place does not transform us from a poor country into a rich one. We did not become a rich country overnight. We are simply a poor country, and now we are less poor. Measured and realistic and authentic, I think.
And really good to hear, because the reason I say this is also because we were talking last week. But, we don't get to hear the stories that the media or the people who are controlling the media don't want us to hear. And there are some really sad stories about poor people in this country. And one of them sort of slightly came to the surface last week, because, shock horror, a baby had been removed from a hospital. But then it transpired that the baby had been removed by its own mother. So that starts you thinking, well, why is that such a problem? Because the baby was going to be put into care. And then the next day, the mother, bless her, handed the baby into a local police station, and everybody stopped reporting on the story. And I kind of thought, there must be. You kept
looking, did you?
There must be more to this. And of course there was. There are chat shows in the afternoon. Obviously I don't see them, but every now and again you get to hear what's coming out of them. And there's this wonderful guy called Hernani Carvalho, and he
Okay.
kind of takes cases and he goes into them and he finds out what's really going on. And he said, this is a disgrace. This is an example of what is going on in the state. The state we've got all these poor people, and then the state says, oh, you've had a baby, you can't possibly look after it, you're far too poor. They take the baby away, but then the people who've taken the baby away get money from the state for finding a foster family. And
yes.
and so it's a horrible business.
Yes.
So there's a political party that hasn't got any kind of representation in Parliament and may never get it for all sorts of reasons. It might not have the right interests, supporting it. But they put out a thing over social media that I found just by chance, really. And they said that the institutionalization of children in Portugal, this may be going on in all European countries, but it's still
I believe
horrible.
it is. Yeah.
Is a highly lucrative business.
Yes.
And they said, why is it that instead of the state removing these children and getting money in order to place them elsewhere, why don't they give the money to these poor parents and help them all get out of poverty together?
Yes, you could be forgiven for thinking in such a logical way about this. It's a horrible racket, and I don't think Portugal is alone in this. But I think it's absolutely wonderful that people are bringing it to light, and people can see what's going on with this.
I think it's important that if we're the greatest economy in the world, we've got to start looking after people better.
Yes, well said, well said. So credit where it's due in a way, and a nice measured response from some of the high-ups there after a little bit of a gloat and some bragging rights for the Prime Minister, but some perspective, and the award perhaps should be seen for what it is, which is a criteria, a set of it's the Economist publication, isn't it? And it is there very much the Economist view of the world. It's not really, it wasn't the Sociologist or the New Society magazine, was it? It was very much an economic.
And I think there was this wonderful quote many times when I think it was when Portugal was under the control of the Troika, the three lenders that got it out of all its mess. And they were talking about the economy. And somebody said, and it was just a wonderful phrase, they said, look, you can't eat the economy. The economy may be doing better, but it doesn't mean anybody can get any more food or...
It's this gaslighting thing, isn't it? People know what the experience of their own lives and whether they can afford things or not.
Exactly.
And it's really strange, isn't it, to hear how well the economy is doing for many people
who are
looking in their purse or their wallet, and that's not being reflected as their lived reality.
Exactly.
Yes,
so it's just part of this mad world that we're in. That people think the economy is.
We rename the podcast The Mad World. Mad World, according to Natasha. Now, talking of credit where it's due, you had a little bit of a tribute to the president last week, and of course he picked up on his sadness about the poverty in the country. We've seen that in this first choice of your news picks this week, and we've got a great economy, but have we really? Staying with the credit where it's due, I think you're appreciating one of the police forces, one of the three police forces of Portugal as well this week. Could you explain those as well? First of all, there are three kinds of policemen. First of all, you want to focus on one of them.
The GNR, that are the lovely people that when I first arrived here, the GNR were always in the tashkas, in the little bars.
Yes.
They were always leaning against the bar with a little shot of something or a bottle of beer. They had their hats sort of perched at the back of their head, and they were all chatting with everybody. They were just lovely. They've since obviously had to be brought a little bit more into line. But they are the police in the sort of non-city areas.
Yes, the Guardia Nacional da República, I think, the GNR.
Yes, Guardia Nacional
of the Republic. Yep.
And then you've got the PSP, which is the Public Security Police, or what do they call it? Polícia de Segurança Pública, and they're in the urban areas. And so, for instance, where I live, we've just got GNR, but the PSP are in the urban areas. And then we've got the PJ, which a bit like in England, when I was really young and I was a reporter on a newspaper, the PJ is like the equivalent of the CID.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And they're just also they're a really wonderful. I mean, when you meet them singly, they're always in plain clothes and they're always a bit shambolic and they've got their cigarettes falling out of their pocket. And you think, well, is this the CID? But actually, as an organization, under this current national director, I think it's called Louise Neves, they are amazing. Every single week, they're cracking another mega this, another mega that, whether it's drug trafficking or people trafficking or corruption. And this week, they've had another mega coup where they've cracked or dismantled, as they call it, a international ring of money laundering that has taken in enormous parts of Europe, but it's a circuit that appears to have been all organized via an area of the north of Portugal that has got the highest population of Chinese. The ringleader, the Chinese man who's meant to be the ringleader, is, I think, still in preventive custody. Certainly nothing had come out yesterday. Yes, that's right. Yesterday,
this is what we're looking at, isn't it?
Because of the general strike, they couldn't go before a judge because, of course, the judge is
really. Wow, the wheels of justice ground to a halt yesterday. On this
well, justice is always grinding to a halt. I mean, justice is always at a semi-halt.
Right. Which must be very frustrating for these police officers you're speaking of. The equivalent of the FBI as well, to put that into context for Americans, I suspect.
Yes, I guess. But here, with the FBI here as well, would also include the SSI, which is that's the intelligence services of Portugal.
Right. Okay. So CIA, FBI,
or maybe that the SSI would be the CIA. I don't know, but I think the PJ, I think they deserve so much praise because they are working. I mean, this ring that they cracked or dismantled, it appears that just in 2 years, this ring has been laundering over 200 million through Portuguese banks. They then transfer the money to some places like Denmark and Germany, and then the money goes back to China, potentially squeaky clean. The thing is, what they don't tell us is where this money originated, or indeed how.
Yes. But is that still a mystery? Did you scratch the surface to find out on this?
I tried, but I mean, we're always up against we're up against time deadlines. We've got to produce stuff. I looked around and sort of to see, but I'm almost certain that when I finish this podcast with you and I go and buy Espresso, which I buy every week because it's great paper, there will be something on what actually is behind this, because it's a major coup.
Well, 7 arrests, 45 official suspects in new PJ, and that's who we're talking about, this particular part of the police force in Portugal, a mega operation, 2-year investigation focused on dismantling transnational money laundering network, not insignificant amounts of money. We're talking about the movements of as much as 209 million euros.
In 2 years, that's a lot of money. And also, I don't know if you're aware, but obviously I am, because I'm having to write news every day. There are so many incidences where just little tiny fudge boxes of news. A Chinese man was discovered driving and through a police stop. And when he was questioned, it was discovered that he had 300,000 euros on him, which he couldn't say where it had come from. What's going on with all these Chinese? It can't be that they're selling all this stuff in the Chinese shops.
You'd think that wasn't a day's taking, was it, in a little corner shop somewhere? What do you think is going on, Natasha? What's your view on it?
To be honest, how can I know?
Right, but I suspect,
I'm not
I imagine you have a suspicion.
Inside information. But if you're just aware of what's going on, there's an environmental lawyer here in the Algarve, very interesting. He has his own Substack called Rui Amores, and he wrote the most fantastic. What do you call it when you write something on a Substack? Just an article, but it was, one of these.
I think it's becoming its own. It's becoming its own noun and verb, substacking, and yes, he stacked, I guess.
Yeah, and I think he's called it a newsletter. Anyway, he calls it the role brackets or the danger geostrategic of photovoltaic parks, and what he's basically suggesting, and giving quite a few reasons why, giving quite a few kind of links that people can go to, is that we're rushing in Portugal to plaster areas of beautiful countryside with solar panels,
Yes.
enormous solar parks. And so many people are very, very upset about this. But
Mhm.
we're rushing to do this because the European Commission or the European Union has said this is the way we must go. But what we're not realizing is that every single panel, every single component in these solar parks is made in China. All the projects in Portugal, because they're all trying to be as cost conscious as possible, they're going for the most cost conscious purchase, which is made in China. Now, this man, Rui Amorge, hazards the hypothesis that what if in China, what if someone in China has control of all the inverters and all the components that power these solar parks, and just one day could be after a chat with Vladimir Putin, goes, "Oh, it's time to turn it all off now, folks." Boom, and then
What a chilling thought, Natasha. But I do understand how your thought processes would have led you there.
so you hear all this stuff, that PJ is cracking down on the Chinese that are doing all this money laundering, and where is this money coming from in the first place that we haven't been told. Then you have people like Rui Amorge writing these very interesting newsletters, and you think, what is going on?
Yes,
I haven't got the
again,
answers for
could be
sure.
forgiven for thinking so. And what comes to mind is, we have this vision, don't we, of coming from the Western civilization of former colonial powers. This is the sort of thing that was going on in the other direction previously, wasn't it? Other countries running amok among beautiful natural resources and landscapes.
Yeah, and now we're doing
Happening
it.
to
And
us,
we're
isn't it
saying
now?
how marvelous it is that we're doing it. I mean, the EU really deserves, in this respect, in the way that it's destroying the countryside, for something ridiculous. Because I remember Ursula von der Leyen saying, we cannot be dependent on China. But, sweetheart,
It's happening
we
anyway.
are.
Sweetheart.
We already are. I mean,
It
what
would
sort of
appear that way.
nonsense is that?
Yes, I can't help but agree with you on that, which connects us to a significant event of this year as we turn the corner and go to 2026 and conclude on 2025, the apoiado, the blackout. So you suspect that all of this solar action is not going to save us from a further apoiado? One of the things, presumably, you're writing about in your annual review of 25. I understand you're busy
Oh, yes, we're
working on
doing
that
an
at the
annual.
moment.
Well, actually, because this is something that our wonderful publisher, Bruce Hawker, asked for, I've tried to keep he doesn't like me talking about the environment. So I've tried to keep it as far away from the environment as possible because I knew it would just irritate him. He asked for the year in review and he's getting it. And he's getting something that I think will make
Can't
him
wait.
happy.
So this is an end of year review of the year
Yeah,
of
we're
Portugal.
doing an
What's
end
going
of
on
the
in
year
Portugal?
review. We're sort of like doing a potted version of what's happened over the year, because
Year in
in
review,
a way
fantastic.
it might give people an idea of where we're headed. I having written it, I don't know if we're headed there or there, because we just seem to go round and round. And I mean, I remember years ago at Battersea Fun Fair, there was that thing called the rotor. Do you remember the rotor?
I do,
It
yes.
was great. And you were stuck to the wall and you just
Yeah,
went round and round and round.
yeah.
And then as it slowed down, obviously everybody slipped down and everybody lost their knickers, and it was just lovely. But
Oh,
I don't know if we're on the rotor and eventually
I remember that bit. I don't remember.
You
Anyway,
don't remember that?
I don't remember people losing their knickers.
Oh, I remember people losing their tops and other people losing their
My
knickers because
goodness.
they'd
Okay,
gone
no wonder it was
upside
so
down.
popular. Well, the happy
Yeah,
times in Battersea Park.
I love that. I love that. It's so sad the Battersea Fun Fair is no longer there.
And the metaphor is that we're losing our sort of psychological knickers at the moment, possibly.
Oh, well, I mean, if you think that we're living in a echo chamber of lies, because that's what it is. I mean, look at yesterday's general strike. The
Right.
union said, this is the biggest general strike in living memory. And
Yeah.
the government said, there's nothing to see here. Everyone was working.
Who's right? Who is
do you
right with that?
believe?
Yes, indeed. Yes,
And I
indeed.
don't live in a city, I mean, in my little town, everybody was working, of course. I mean,
Yeah.
the schools were shut, the finances were shut, the post office was shut, but they're always shut anyway. There's always a reason for them to be shut.
Fantastic.
They're
Always great to talk to you.
always saying to me, the Griff.
Yes, yes. Well, okay. This is episode 4. We've got one more news pick to look at. Natasha Donn's news review of the week. Thank you for those two so far. And we're moving on to what might be loosely called grumbling Americans. Is that right?
I called it Grumbling Americans. Well, basically,
Why?
it was very, very interesting. Again, the first story came out of Espresso last week after I'd spoken to you on the podcast. I just thought, oh, pity, I could have talked about this. But it was just very interesting because I believe Espresso did something that really wasn't very journalistically correct. They seem to have given the article to a law firm to write. So what it was all about was the gist of the article was that there were a lot of Americans who were putting in an action in the Constitutional Court, and they were it had a funny old name. What's it called? An amicus curiae. But basically,
Okay.
they are challenging the government's changes to the nationality law because they're angry. They feel this is the thing that did not sound right. They're feeling defrauded by the fact that they can't claim nationality in 5 years. They might have to wait for 10 if the nationality law is accepted the way it is.
Yes.
And I was thinking, Americans feeling defrauded
Missold.
by not being able to become Portuguese. It just did not sound very believable. And then the next day came a story in Público, completely different, but also rather connected because both stories mentioned the same community of foreigners called Nomad Gate, which I then went to look at, which of course was very, very revealing. So what the next story was all about was a Portuguese businessman who'd operated or allegedly operated perhaps, but I mean, it just seems that he has been operating a pyramid scheme. So he's been taking money off Americans and other nationalities, Indians and whatever, and he's been giving them ideas of investments that were just too good to be true, because of course they weren't true, and they all paid into them. And what, as a spin-off of this investment, they would all get golden visas.
Yeah.
And then I thought, and I looked at some of the conversations on Nomad Gate, and there were things like, has anybody heard about what's going on with the Lagos Country Club? And then somebody said, no. And of course, it was because that's how this Lagos thing looks like. See this dreadful old building. I went down there last week to take a picture.
Brutalist, yes, unfinished.
It's been like that for all the years I can remember.
Hasn't it?
I wanted to go and take the photograph because, of course, the photograph at the top of the article was completely bogus. It was showing what people were investing in, but it doesn't exist.
There it is. Beautiful.
Yeah, isn't it lovely? But it doesn't exist. Anyway, then, of course, I realized these grumbling Americans are terrified, I presume, that the golden visas they've got will eventually be connected to bogus investments.
Right. Okay.
And then they might lose them because, of course, they did invest, but their money was all taken by a guy who's just run off with it.
So am I right in thinking then that their beef, as it were, with the investment problem is now being shifted to being missold by the Portuguese government?
Yeah, which I think is totally wrong. They weren't. Right. I mean, the Portuguese government is trying to regulate immigration. It's perfectly reasonable that the nationality law will undergo changes.
Yes.
And to say, I also don't understand why anyone would feel defrauded when you can perfectly well be a resident of this country for years and years and years. I've been a resident for 40 years or 38 years, I'm perfectly happy. Yes. I know I could become a national. I speak Portuguese. My children are Portuguese. They all went to Portuguese school, my house and my job, and I even have a Portuguese pension. So yes, I could become a Portuguese national, and maybe I will one day, but it's at the moment would be so ill-advised because I'm as basically like on the floor.
But presumably, Natasha, you didn't come to Portugal thinking this is a route to an additional passport.
Oh, of course not. I came to Portugal. No. Well, I did say, I didn't come to Portugal to stay.
And here you are. I think it is a matter of expectations, isn't it? And that's not to say that a certain sense of entitlement or the grumbling isn't, that we might criticize that. But if that's how people were sold or what they were sold, you could understand them having a little bit of a grievance about
Well,
that.
yes, sure, they could be a little bit upset, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be booted out of the country. They've got their golden visa. They
Yeah.
are residents. They're
Yes.
saying, well, we were told after 5 years of residency, we could become nationals. Well,
Yes.
okay, after 10 years of residency, it's only one renewal.
Yes. And
What's the big fuss?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not in their shoes, but I suspect it's because they went through a sales process that was the icing on the cake of a political process, and they're focusing on the icing and the commercial agreement and the personal gains they would receive from becoming residents and citizens of
No, but
Portugal.
they're already
And
residents, you see.
the
They're already
cake,
residents.
sure, but the
So
cake is
what
collapsing,
is
isn't it?
the personal gain you get from being a national, from a resident?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question, and
What is
perhaps something they might take on board, because it applies to a lot of different people, not just golden visa applicants. It applies to other people, doesn't it? Who want the route of presumably after or previously after 5 years they could become citizens, but now it's going to take 7 or 10 depending on where you've come from. But that's a really good question, and for you it's not a big deal, the difference
I
between.
don't think so. I mean, you saying that your interview, which I'm still trying to get to listen to with Fred Phillips, he said, "Look, I'm still
I'm a guest.
He's been
He
here
used the word
since
guest.
the beginning of time."
Yeah,
I think I feel very much more Portuguese, I think, than English, and I speak Portuguese most of the day. I mean, when I say I speak Portuguese most of the day, when I speak to anybody, when I'm not writing, I speak Portuguese.
Yeah.
But then sometimes I don't, it's true. But I still feel that there are parts of this country that I will never understand by dint of not being Portuguese.
Yes.
And I'm not upset about that, and I don't feel I'm entitled to be Portuguese. I'm an English person who lives in Portugal.
I hear that, and I get you, and I would take a very similar view myself, that I would be a guest for a very long time, and integration takes generations, not just
I mean, my boys are Portuguese, and the first one is more Portuguese than the second one, because the second one's married a Portuguese Australian, and so they speak English all the time together, and they are more, I'd say they're more international. But my first son is so Portuguese.
I think it's all about expectations, isn't it? And we will see what happens. What do you think of their chances of having a successful? I mean, they may regret the day they ever pushed the button to start a Portuguese legal process, right? There is that.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, obviously, if they've got a lot of money and a lot of influence and they've got into espresso, they may be helped along and they may get a pass.
Yes.
But what was interesting is they also said they were representing thousands of Americans, and I don't think thousands of Americans went for golden visas. I think they went for things more like D7 and other ways of getting residency.
Yes.
So the whole thing didn't really ring true to me, and I just felt that the article had been written very much. I mean, it did mention the law firm, and I thought, no, I'm not going there, because it just seemed like it was just too slanted towards a law firm putting this out, trying to get more exposure.
So it was news when it was put. Yes, okay, very good. We will see what happens with that, but I guess the message for this country and others is that governments do change their requirements.
Everything changes all the time. Look at what's just happened in America.
Yes,
you can't fly in there anymore unless you've got 5 years of social media history. Yes. If I had to show 5 years of my social media history, honestly, they would all be so bored. I basically just share things of lost dogs.
I thought you were going to say you would be immediately imprisoned, and I was going to hope.
No, I can't be bothered with any of that. I just I try and find lost dogs or dogs that need
and not anti-American sentiments that they're looking for, presumably.
And I can't be bothered with saying how I feel, because it's terribly boring. Nobody wants to know how everybody feels.
Well, what an interesting note to end on. Yes. What an interesting note to end on there. And next week, I suspect possibly our last one of the year, but certainly the last one before Christmas, we will look at your year in review, I hope.
I don't know. Are we going to do it next week? When is next week?
It'll only be the 19th. We're away this side of Christmas.
So we're doing the 19th.
I look forward to chatting with you again. They're always great fun.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Carl.
Muito
You
obrigado.
too. Take
Ciao,
care.
ciao.
Bye. Bye.